Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
After 1 month of talking about the World Cup, it is now over. We are back. Soccer Today's back. MLS, bread and butter, our bread and butter, and of course, the world of football with a soccer perspective. Duane, Rollins, good morning.
Good morning, and hopefully many of our new listeners from last month join us and keep us on this journey, which has now into its, fifth year? We've been doing it for a while, so yeah. I need a little bit of a decompressed break from the World Cup, but later on this week we'll probably break down some of our favorite moments a little bit, but I think it's time, as you say, to move towards the bread and butter again today, Kevin.
And we had quite a weekend of controversy, especially regarding managers in Major League Soccer. On Saturday, there's the famous Mike Pecky rant. We'll listen to it in a few minutes. There's a weird turn of events in Montreal for San Jose. If you are a San Jose fan, you can listen to my special show that I did late Saturday night explaining my perspective right there at the stadium when one of the weirdest substitutions events happened right in front of our eyes, Duane.
Yeah, it's a strange one, Kevin. You obviously saw it firsthand, and you'll give your initial take right there. But maybe we review it a little bit now, I suppose. Like we normally do what's called a Canadian review, and this kind of is attached to it because it was part of the Canadian involvement here. But well, just give us the TLDR of it, and then we'll go from there. How's that?
Cool. Okay, so it all happened. Anibal Godoy was playing for San Jose, number 20. On the right side of the defense. And the first half, where they were located on the pitch, he was close to Mikel Stare, the head coach of San Jose. And for a good 25 of the 31 minutes he actually played, he was getting yelled at. He was not playing well. Let's put it this way. He was responsible for the first goal and not playing well at all and not showing effort. This is not what it's about. Gets subbed off at the 31st minute. Nothing about an injury at that moment. It's not like he's asking to sub, and he's really not happy about it. Leaves the tunnel right away. Doesn't go on the bench, just leaves for the tunnel, and not seen on the bench since. Then he's replaced by Fatai Alashe. Fatai Alashe plays about 4 minutes, and then at halftime comes out and warms up with the subs to make sure he's still warm. And then 45 minutes and 20 seconds, so 20 seconds after the beginning of the second half, Fatai Alashe is subbed off for Oxford. And the reaction of Fatai Alashe arguing with Mikel Stare on the sideline, you can actually read his lips, what are you doing, and other things that he's saying that I probably can't say on this show. Very heated argument. Fatai Alashe took the place on the bench, not happy, very angry. And Oxford comes in for him. And that's a little stretch of event that's weird. Something I've never seen in 6 years of covering soccer in the USL, NASL, MLS level. A sub being subbed in for a sub, and altercations with the coach, and very public and very loud. By the way, when I'm saying that Godoy was berated by Mikel Stare, I could hear him, the coach, from my press box, about 30 rows up from the actual sideline. Couldn't discern the words what they're saying, but with the movement with his arms and the big yelling, he was not happy with his play. Then I asked the coach after the game, what didn't you like about Godoy's play in the first 41st minute? And apparently, oh no, it was okay, he was injured. Well, he wasn't injured. So yeah, that's the situation.
Yeah, whenever a sub for a sub happens, which as you say is very rare, generally there's an injury involved, or there's like a strategic reason for it, and the player is made very aware of it immediately, and there isn't like a big battle on there. So this tells me that either there's a lack of communication, a complete loss of the dressing room, or there's really problems behind the scene that we're not aware of, right? But either way, it's such a public display of displeasure, both when you take a guy off early and when you sub a sub, that it's players get their back up, and it really is a problematic thing, especially if it's not like I've seen it before where players come off sub for sub and they're like their shoulders are up and their eyes are wide open, but the coach immediately pulls them over and goes, look, this is what's happening, and it's not about your play, it's about this, and then they maybe relax a little bit. They might not like it because they're athletes and they're competitors, but they maybe understand it a little bit more. But it doesn't sound like there was any type of understanding or explaining here, and then after the fact, there was sort of a desire to to do the gaslight us, basically.
Yeah.
Well, what you saw isn't what happened.
Yeah, what you saw is not what happened. Both were injured. Who really knows what happens? It's kind of tough to say. I don't know anyone outside of Tristan who was with me the entire time who actually knows what happens more. We were the closest as you can, and we were two guys talking to Michael Starry, three with Kelsey Patterson of the Canadian Press. So being only us gathering the audio and asking him directly the question, and full measure, he came out, he answered questions. I know he really doesn't have a choice. But there was about a 38-minute meeting between the players. One of them was 6 minutes on the pitch with the coach, and then in the locker room, and then the coaching staff, and then Michael Starry got in and out of that meeting with his phone in the antechamber of the locker room. So it's more complicated than just injuries. And if you're subbed off for injury for the two players, well, you don't react that way, right? If you're actually injured and you're subbed off, guess what? You'll be like, oh, you're not happy because you're injured, but you're not that mad that you're not playing. Both Anibal Godoy and Fatai Alashe did not look happy whatsoever with this weird decisions made by Michael Starry.
No, as you say, I have seen. I'll give you a concrete example of a player sub for sub that I've seen just this year, and it was in the CCL, and it was Tosaint Ricketts getting subbed off after he'd been subbed in about 10 minutes in, but that involved an injury. He was subbed in for an injured player, and he played until about the 75th minute where he was subbed off at that point. That was understandable, right? There are reasons that you can do it. The player wasn't fully fit at that point, so you bring him in because he's your best option at that moment. He doesn't have the full fitness to go the full 90, so you replace him at that point. No one has their backup. I've also seen it before, what I've said just a minute ago, where they're taking him off. Basically, it's similar. It's usually a forward, and it's usually because they want to get some defensive stability to protect the lead. They've subbed him on earlier than they thought they would. They pull him off. They immediately pull him aside and say, look, this isn't about you. This is about the tactics so that we can get the 3 points tonight. And the player is like, okay, I get it. I don't like it because I want to play, but I get it, right? This is not that case. So, again, when you want to look at it from what does this mean to San Jose, well, San Jose is a club that we haven't really had a clue what the hell they've been doing for a while now.
Since 2013. Since 2013, Duane. Usually they had a good year, bad year, good year, like an odd number year was good, even number year were bad. Since 2013, it's pretty much just on the bad side.
Well, it's been a long, long time since Duane de Rosario was, winning the MLS Cups for Earthquakes 1.0, right? Or I guess it would have been 2.0, and this is 3.0 now. But it's been a long time since this club has been relevant. We joke, them and Colorado are the two teams. I dare you right now, do an exercise 2 weeks from now where you list all the MLS teams, and I guarantee you, unless you're from San Jose or Colorado, one of those will be the one that you forget. Yeah.
And before I touch on San Jose as a soccer market and the untapped potential of that area, I want to say one thing too. When you substitute a player 45 minutes and 20 seconds into the second half, couldn't you sub in to start the second half so you don't have this quote-unquote public humiliation of the player? You could do really sly. You could do it on the sly. Okay, ref, made a change at halftime. Okay, perfect. The other one starts the second half. And you don't necessarily look like you're showing off your players. Because that's what the perception was on Saturday. If it was the case, yes or no. Was it an injury? Yes or no. But guess what? Those two subs made it look like Michael Starry was showing off the players and was showing them who's the boss.
Well, and look, sometimes maybe that's okay. Sometimes, rare. And you have to look at the rest of the reaction of the team. Are they kind of looking at the coach like WT, H will be played? W2H, or are they going kind of looking away from the player going, yeah, you got what you deserve, guy? That's, you kind of have to look at it that way. But ultimately, I've said the word communicate to you. You mentioned halftime. Well, at halftime, if you're going to sub, you go at halftime. Look, even if it's because of play, and they might not like this, but it's not going to be in the public, and you're not showing them off at that point. You're going, look, I'm not happy with your play. I'm not happy with your play because of this, and this, because we worked on this week. You're not doing what I'm telling you to do. Sorry, man, but you're out. And then at least he can save face, and he can have time to calm himself down, and he can, go to the bench and wrap his knee up so it looks like he's hurt. He can save face, right? And that way you're protecting that sort of relationship moving forward. But when you pull them in the middle of the game and they're getting this shock initial reaction, the whole world that's watching, the Impact play the Earthquakes.
Yeah.
So 30,000 people see it, right? So it's there's ways to handle it, and it speaks to man management. And look, I don't watch enough Earthquakes games. Certainly over the last month, I haven't watched enough Earthquake games, as in I have watched none.
Who has? No, I'm just kidding here. But 10-game unwinning streak. So they haven't won since the beginning of May. Yeah, winless streak. That's what I meant. Yeah. So that's a long stretch of games with no victories, and yes, some of them were by one goal. It's not always as gloom as it actually looks, but it does take a toll, and there's a accumulation aspect to this. And was this the boiling point? That's what I'm asking you, Duane. Will we see some changes this week in San Jose?
Well, yeah. I mean, probably you might. The transfer window is open. You have obviously players that are going on there. I don't know enough to comment with detail about whether the coach is in any trouble, but 10 games without a win, 9 games without a win is certainly, indication. And we're noticing it more and more in MLS the last few years. It used to be it was nearly impossible to get fired as an MLS manager. That's not necessarily the case anymore. We are seeing teams pull the trigger a little quicker than we have in the past. So certainly something to watch. There's no, unlike, we're going to talk about TFC in a minute, likely. And unlike what Greg Vanny's on, having a tough time trying to figure out how to get something out of this MASH unit that is currently TFC and not succeeding, he has a lot of, saved up good grace, right? This is not the case in San Jose.
It's not. San Jose has a big market, and we don't view it like this. When we view San Jose, it's like, oh, it's a small market. Guess what? The Bay Area is a lot bigger than San Jose. And you don't see the potential of this franchise with all.
You look at San Jose as a sports market. The Sharks do well. They're of the warmer. Well, I know San Francisco area. The Bay Area is not exactly like the Sun Belt precisely, but it is a less traditional hockey market. They have managed to find an audience there. They've managed to be quite successful in what in that part of the world is a niche sport. So no one can give me any excuse that soccer can't sell in the Bay Area because hockey did. So if hockey can, soccer can. And I know that in Canada, our Canadian listeners think of hockey as this major player, but in the States, it's a niche, right? Like it's not maybe as much of a niche as MLS can be, but it's certainly the same type of marketing that would go in to find that audience. And even cheaper, you can get younger guys that are just starting out in the Bay Area. As you say, if you're in the tech industry and you're just, a junior level engineer of some type, then maybe you don't have a lot of money, but you have enough money that you want to do some stuff to blow off steam, and drinking and jumping up and down at a soccer stadium is a way to do that. So yeah, they've never done enough there for sure since they came back. They lost that team because they couldn't get a stadium built back in 2005, I believe is when Houston moved, if my memory is correct. 2008 is when they came back. Since the 2008 revival, it was kind of like they went back there because they felt they needed to, because of the historic name and because this was an MLS 96 team. And I almost think that if you want to get real, meta or detailed or conspiracy theory or something about this, that the lack of effort and lack of seem of concern amongst some in MLS about the Columbus being a 96 market and potentially going away might stem from the fact that they went back to San Jose and it really didn't work out the second time. So why bother? You can't fix a dead horse. You can't beat a dead horse, but you can't fix one either. You can't bring it back to life. That might be the thinking.
Interesting times, and we'll see what the ramifications of what happened Saturday are, if there's any. We'll take a quick break and come back with a Canadian review.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
This show is brought to you by SportsInspired.ca. Get your sport-inspired merchandise and our SPN store at SportsInspired.ca. Just like my beautiful mug right here. Get yours for $15 Canadian. That's a bargain, especially if you're in the United States right now. Get this beautiful mug. Duane, speaking of beautiful, Montreal Impact, 5 victories out of their last 6 games, 5 wins straight in Montreal. Stats Puto back being his fortress.
Yeah, only the New York game, which is a bit of an outlier when you look at it. Just real quickly before if you're new to soccer today, one of our highlights, one of the things that we do is we often mix our metaphors, and it was just kind of our thing. So fix a dead horse. It's new now. That's going to be a meme, just like paint a coat is. But at any rate, the impact.
There's nothing you can't fix with duct tape, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So that's kind of our thing, mixing metaphors and making stuff up on the fly that sounds funny. No, the impact. Yeah, it's almost like the karma of good steals moved from a little bit east from. So the Canadian team that has to do well. The Whitecaps are doing fine. We're going to get to them. Don't worry. But yeah, it's been a good run there, and it all started, as we said during the World Cup today, a couple of times. It all started with kind of the bottom. They started from the bottom. And now they're here just a few months later. And I don't know, you tell me, you're watching it firsthand. What's the biggest difference on the field that you're seeing?
The cohesion aspect, the understanding of we need to play a certain way. We need to play the way our manager tells us to get results. And I think it happened when they hit rock bottom or close to it. I know there's DC United and Toronto there, so they didn't really hit rock bottom, but they were close to it. When that happened, with a lot of like 4 losses in a row, 5 losses in 5 games, like 4 straight games with not scoring, then they went on a run of 4 straight games without conceding, and they were the best defense in June and the half of July. That has a lot to do with it. I think the presence of Rod Fanny back from injury had a lot to do with this as well. Added the markers that Silva is finally answering a bit of the expectations that was put on him when he signed with Montreal earlier this season. The rise on form of a Rudy Camacho in the defense, and I think as well the solid play of a Daniel Lovitz and a Chris Duval when they were both playing as fullbacks brings something to the attack. Now they're not over reliant on Piatti. Piatti gets a goal or a goal every 2 games pretty much, but a goal every 2 games is not enough to get results. Secondary scoring has been a bit better for Montreal over the last few games, and Evan Bush, best keeper in the league right now since the beginning of the season. 3 straight clean sheet, 20 minutes away from the record of 4 straight clean sheet. That was very close last week. So all those things combined, I think it is explainable by that one performance after their terrible slump where the team itself realized that, you know what, our manager actually does give us a chance to win. And once you get behind your manager and you all gel together, pushing in the same direction and not just trying to play individually, you see a difference. And we see Piatti tracking back. We see Piatti finding his teammates, which at the beginning of the season he wasn't. At the beginning of the season was a bit over-relying on himself. Now trusting his teammates, and that does make a big difference. And you see Piatti setting up great runs for a tighter being used a bit differently tactically as well. One of the comments by Rémi Garde that was interesting after the game, Duane, he was saying, look, Safir Taider does great runs. He did great runs all season long, but not always at the right spot on the field. The runs were not necessarily going in the right direction. We've played with it a bit. We've showed him what we actually want, and he scored 3 goals over the last 2 games.
Yeah, precisely. There's an old adage, Kevin, that the truth is often in the middle, right? That the extremes are not where you find truth, that you find truth somewhere between them. And I look at the Impact, and they have been extreme. They're extremely good right now. They were extremely bad about 5-6 weeks ago. What is their truth?
4, 5th, 6th in the Eastern Conference, battling for a playoff spot, and I guess that's where they'll be. The schedule will become more difficult, though. That's the happy aspect of June and July. When you're a Canadian team, you actually get more games at homes, because in March and April, when it was cold, you were on the road, and you're going to be on the road further down the season. So in the summer month, you have a bigger quota of games at homes back to back. You have a chance to be on a run. The schedule will become a bit more difficult now, especially with the Canadian Championship starting on Wednesday with Vancouver, those 2 games, home and away. So you have that aspect of the schedule will become more difficult, but they took advantage of their schedule at home.
Well, okay, and that's what you have to do. Points in the board are points in the pocket, which is another adage we say in the show all the time. So they have those points in the pocket now, and they've certainly gone from a position where I would not have bet very much at all that they could have made the playoffs, to the point where, yeah, I look at their play and I look at their their direction, their trajectory, and I look at the other teams that are around those bubble teams, and I do think that that's where they're going to fit in. And I think, yeah, Montreal has every bit as much a chance to do that. And I wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, part of that reason, too, is the team that we'll talk about next dropping out of the race and unexpectedly. So that's one position that we assume wouldn't be there that's going to be there, right? Yeah. It's been remarkable. And look, I might have to make a trip up in the playoffs to watch a playoff game this year in Canada, but it's not going to be a subway right away. It might be a Via train right away, and that's not something I expected back in March.
Wait, we're telling me right now, okay, it's over. Toronto FC is not making the playoffs in 2018.
That would be the logical conclusion, yes. However, I will say this. I did find odds of 150 to 1 that TFC will win the MLS Cup. I am going to put $10 down on that, because if they make the playoffs, I'll bet they're off. And you never know in Major League Soccer. Seattle was 19 points back for a playoff spot on July 26th. So it would be a similar run from there. I would actually recommend, to put the TFC bias aside for a second, any team that has decent talent that is underperforming, for you to put $10 on 150 to 1 in MLS, because anything can happen. So that's fair. If it doesn't happen, I lose $10, but I would have spent it on Diet Pepsi anyway. So
and you can win 1,500. So that's a possibility. One thing for me, though, that really shows me the difficulty. We calculated it quickly last week. 54 points, usually it's a number that gets you 6th, 5th, or 4th, depending on the year, but pretty much a guaranteed playoff spot. Toronto has 16 points as of right now on July 16th. You make the quick math, it's a 2-point per game average, which means you need to almost win out to finish the season with 54 points.
Which is what Seattle did. That's when you look at their record from the ad. Now, they all obviously added a big piece in the middle of the season there. TFC's not going to add a big piece, but they might get a big piece back. So that would be the analogy. And not to belabor this, but you have to, because it is the direct comparison. And it's especially relevant to TFC fans who saw the end result of that direct comparison right in front of their eyes in 2016 as Seattle lifted the MLS Cup in front of a frigid, upset, and hammered TFC crowd that was even more hammered a few minutes later. But at any rate, no, I don't think it's going to happen, to be clear. But as I say, it's worth a $10 roll. Look, what's wrong with TFC? The question is not that hard to answer. They are incredibly beat up, and not just injured. Every team gets injuries. But the type of players that have been injured for this team are the absolute vital core spine of the team. And that contributes to everyone else having to work just a little bit harder to try and fill in those gaps. And then they start to press things, because they have 16 points and they don't quite know what's happening, and they're used to winning, and they're not used to facing adversity. And Michael Bradley starts doing the bad Michael Bradley thing of overextending himself and trying to do everything on the pitch rather than what he's good at, which is sort of being that control filter that allows the rest of the great parts to flourish. You got Javinko, who suddenly decides to do the bad Javinko thing, which is, I'm going to beat 3 men on the dribble and score a curling goal in the top corner from 33 yards, right? Like, this is what happens, and they start to press and press and press. They need Josie back. They need Mavinga back. They need more back. I don't know if they're going to get any of those players back. Mavinga maybe for a stretch, but we might get more back physically, but whether Drew Moore is ever going to be Drew Moore again is a question. So if your TFC management right now, what you have to be starting to look at objectively is, okay, well, do you have a Canadian Championship still in front of us, which will give us a CCL run, and that's a short sprint, and they have Ottawa first. So really, they should be able to get by a USL team, you would hope, although that would be rock bottom if they did not, and I'm not counting the Fury out by any means.
Yeah.
But if they do, then really it's just, you have to get enough of a result in a playoff against either Vancouver or Montreal, and they've done that before over the last year. They've won a lot of 2-game playoffs, right? So they, both in the Voyageurs Cup and MLS playoffs, they've done that well. So they know how to do that, and CCL for that matter. So that would give them sort of something to focus on positive while they go, okay, we need to find a new center back, because what is obvious about the current, formation that they have is that they have pieces that might supplement and complement their top end pieces, but they don't have pieces that can be top end pieces themselves. Nick Hagelin is a nice pawn, but he is not a bishop, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I never really played chess, but I do know what you mean. All right, let's transition to Vancouver for a second before we just take a look internationally at some of the news that happened while we were paying attention to the World Cup. Vancouver is now 8th in the Western Conference, a big defeat on Saturday, 3-1, but there was a great goal by Alphonso Davies. Amazing individual effort. Speaking of dribbling past 3 players and then over 3 players, losing the ball, getting the ball back, opening up his left foot and curling it to the back post. Canadian prodigy Alphonso Davies, which will be in the All-Star game, the second youngest player ever to make the All-Star game after a certain ado.
Well, he'll be, and the one thing who do we always compare him to, sarcastically sometimes, but also sort of worrisomely? So there you go. Look, the Alphonso Davies watch is going to be one of the most interesting things to look at within not just Canadian soccer or MLS or Vancouver Whitecaps soccer, but within MLS in general. It's another young player. The Blue, when he left, kind of caught people off guard, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Not off guard, but they didn't really focus on it the way that maybe they should have. And I think that had to do with the fact that they never focused on Blue the way they should have, period, because he didn't break out. Yeah, and that sort of resulted in, like, just those that were in the know, like your Matt Doyles of the world would have went, talking about this Blue kid. But by and large, most people weren't looking at him the same way they were looking at Davies, and I think Montreal fans kind of are used to that. So that's just what happened there. But this Davies thing is going to be a big saga in a lot of ways. And I don't know, like, my Canadian hat says get him to a big club as quick as possible. Just as I wanted Kyle Lauren out of MLS, and just as I'm happy for Blue, whether he comes to Canada or not, I think it's the right move for him to go to Barca B. Davies moving away from the Whitecaps is going to be something that is going to be interesting to watch. And I think that hopefully the Whitecaps view it the way that they should, which to me is that they've got to move him on, because they can get a transfer fee that I think will be significant and allow them to build the team the way they want to build it anyway, which is through depth rather than big stars. And if they get $10 million for him or $8 million for him, that's going to allow them to spend a lot of that money, because he's a homegrown and they're going to get 3/4 of it back. So that's going to be a significant move for them.
Exactly. But Vancouver, sorry, go ahead.
I said in terms of this year, I mean, I don't know. They're never as good as you think they are. They're never as bad as you think they are. That's our Vancouver line for the last 2 years, and I don't think there's anything to suggest it's not still the same thing.
They're 8th in the Western Conference right now with 26 points, only 2 points ahead of the Galaxy, who are in 6th, and the last spot that gives access to the playoff. Houston is in between with 28, and Portland is 4th with 30. RSL is 5th with 29. So they're only 4 points away from 4th place in the Western Conference. It's getting more crowded around the dreaded red line for the Western Conference, and I want to move to Real Salt Lake. Like, yes, so Vancouver is having a good... It's just putting results together, putting a string of results together for Vancouver that could actually be useful. So 2, 3, 4 wins in 5 games could be what Vancouver needs to raise that confidence and maybe make sure they're above that red line. But, a team that's playing okay, decently, they're 5th right now in the Western Conference, but had a big loss on Saturday, 3-2. It was 3-0 for Minnesota, and then they came back, and it was funny because both coaches in this game made a rant. Adrian Heath, after the game, talking to the Fox reporter, saying, "I'm so mad. We were up 3-0. This is unacceptable. I'm not going to deal with this." And you know what I mean? And I'm not going to put up with this. And then you had the famous Mike Pecky rant that finished like this. I'm going to not play the entire 3-minute rant because it is very long and it's a bit profanity-laced. But here's how it ended for the last minute of that rant.
The only thing I get from MLS is stop criticizing the referees. I want to know where the referees are right now. Why can't we ask the referee a question? Why can't we do that? Why can't we ask, why didn't you go to VAR? Why didn't you call that? Why, when the studs are coming up, you just give a yellow card? That would make them more human. It would be better to MLS. It would be better for this league, for the fans, for the owners, for the coaches, for the players, to hear from them and to hear their side of the story. And perhaps then we say, okay, I see it. Maybe it happened a little fast. Maybe the guy in the booth, wherever the hell he is, watching this, maybe he was watching The Simpsons at the same time. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's not good enough to me. And I'll take the fine. Jeff Agus, fine me. Fine me. I don't care anymore. Nobody else, no other coach in this league steps up a little more than they should. I'm going to. So drain my bank account. I don't give a anymore. Okay?
Okay. Now, Duane, Is he wrong? Is he right? Does he have does he have a point?
Yeah, he has a point, I think. Mike Petke is kind of very good at sending those kind of messages through the media. It's something that he's effectively done before. And I think that's probably a little bit what you're seeing here. He's a guy that has had some success that way, and I think he's beloved because of that for those reasons, right? So he's part of that and part of the whole Mike Petke story. But yeah, well, what's your take?
Well, it's kind of interesting, the aspect of talking about the referees, and this sums up to an issue that happened earlier this week. And if you're a pool reporter, if you're listening to this and you're a pool reporter in your own stadium and actually write questions to the referee, you're not even able to mention VAR, to ask anything surrounding the VAR process, or why didn't you review this, why did you review that one. And I think that part of it, I think, needs to be worked on. And he has a point in a way. I don't think referees should come out and have a scrum with the media. But, the pool reporting should be able to ask questions about VAR because it's part of what happens in the game. You're allowed to ask about anything else, or kind of, you can try, and maybe you could find a good way to have the coach or anyone ask one question to the referees and maybe get the referee's take on it. That could be interesting.
We could just fire VAR into the sun. That's my theory on how to fix it. But no, that's the frustration that you hear from managers across the league, is that they just don't know how it's used. They don't understand, and they can't get answers. And to me, that's a problem. I know there are so many people that love it out there. I don't get it. I never will. But I get that. But if they're going to use this moving forward, they really need to have it understood universally as exactly how this is being used. Say what you will about how it's used in the NHL, for instance. You understand how it's being used in the NHL. It's being used to do goaltender interference. No one knows what that is, but it's being used for that. It's being used to check offside, although less so this year because there's a penalty if you get it wrong. There's very specific guidelines, and it's understood, and there were less problems with it this year with the expanded version than there were last season than there were 2 seasons ago. And I think that we're very much in the growing pains part of the VAR implementation of MLS. There weren't a lot of complaints with it in the half season, but I almost think that they probably used it less in that first half season as they were getting used to it. And now that it's full on in, there's really no definition for its use right now, and that's really frustrating people. And as I said, Petke's not the only person complaining about this. This is a universal thing across the league, as far as I can tell.
And what Petke mentioned that was interesting to me is he doesn't care anymore. No other coaches are going to step up. Drain my bank account, he said to Jeff Agus, who's responsible for the fine with MLS and the coaches' disciplinary committee. So maybe there's something to that. If a few coaches got up and a few of them argued together, we heard Rémi Garde in a very subtle ways mention this at the beginning, and I think he was penalized by the referees a few times, and now things have calmed down a bit for him in Montreal, and then things are getting back to be a bit more casual and more regular conversations with the fourth official and the other referees. But I think there's something to the aspect of getting to know more the thought process of either the referee or the VAR himself. And VAR actually stands for the video assistant referee. When we talk about the actual watching of the video, it's the video review. So those two things are interesting to me. But for Mike Petke, who got ejected in that game, and the rant started by him saying, "You guys didn't ask me the question," and speaking to the media, but I wanted to answer it, so I'm gonna let you guys know. Why was I subbed off? Why was I sent off? Why was I ejected? Because I complained about this, and the guy comes in, studs up, a foot off the leg, a foot off the ground, and if he comes in 1 foot more face off, he breaks his leg. And my guy gets a yellow card just because he toe pokes a ball. I'm trying to do a free kick, and it's 15 yards away. So, yeah, there's something to it. And I guess it's Mike Petke maybe taking the edge of the defeat off the players, putting it on himself. No one's talking about the loss 3-2 now. They talk about the Mike Petke rant.
Sure. I mean, look, Vanny's done that a couple times this year as well, and I think it has a little bit of that motivation to it. So the attention becomes about the VAR. The Chicago game in particular, the TFC blew the late lead. He went on a bit of a VAR run at that game. So it is a coaching tool, but I do think there's legitimacy in their complaints as well. What Vanny said, and I think this is key to understanding, when, Petke says other coaches need to step up, I think other coaches might need to step up, but more accurately, other management, other teams need to step up, because really, if you don't have your owner behind you, getting fined a whole lot could get you fired, because the coaches aren't paying fines. The team is. So, this is something that really needs to be understood as well by fans. It's not just like, some coaches don't have the ability to step up if they want their job security to stay in place, and it's maybe not a hill you want to die on, because there is a weekly sort of interaction that happens between the teams and the league in terms of the referees. There is a conference call essentially that goes down. A conference call. There is a direct call. They talk to each other each week. So there are questions, and there's an ability to have some kind of dialogue. But what I have heard from Greg Vanny specifically is that the answers they get from that dialogue are just frustrate them more, because they don't seem to directly have answers that satisfy what they're not understanding. And that tells me that this is imperfect right now. And this is one of my big issues with VAR. And you're right, it is the video assistant referee, but like, a tissue is a Kleenex, and Kleenex is a brand name, but no one cares if Kleenex is a Kleenex, right? Yeah. VAR is VAR. What frustrates me about it is it seems as much about show to me as it does getting the calls right. It's about saying, we actually understand what's going on, and we're going to, continue to fight the good fight to make the game perfect and make the game, refereed properly. And I don't see that as much as it's just like I don't see that happening. I see that as them putting a big show on to say that they're doing something, because it's easier to do that than it would be to just make, hire and train better referees.
Which they're trying to do, to be quite honest, but the results are not necessarily all there for now. There was a Mark Geiger at the World Cup, though, so there's that. That'll be all for today. As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. with Charles Bohm. Finally back on the show after a few months of covering the World Cup. Charles was at Audi Field on Saturday covering the debut of this brand new stadium. Charles has been a DC United reporter for a long time, so this means a lot, and we'll be talking to Charles Bohm tomorrow on the show about DC United and Audi Field. And as always, at 24th Minute for Duane, at Kev Laramee for me. Get your SPN mug, SPN t-shirts at sportsinspired.ca. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.